Do you ever get lonely? Or have you just gotten used to it? The old woman didn't look up from the window when she asked it. She was watching the courtyard below, a sparrow on a stone bench, ordinary and brief, and her hands rested in her lap, with the stillness of someone who had learned to hold things without gripping. Sarah Lund stood just inside the doorway, flowers in one arm, not quite sure if she'd been invited fully in or only partway. She was 26 and had been teaching 3rd grade at Millfield Elementary for 2 years. She had started visiting Cedar Grove Nursing Home on Saturdays because her own grandmother had died alone in a place like this, and she had never fully forgiven herself for not visiting more. She chose a resident at random from the volunteer coordinator's list. The name given to her was Vivian Ashford. Room 114. Quiet, the coordinator had said, doesn't get visitors. I got used to it, Vivian said, answering her own question. And then you walked in with those yellow flowers, and now I'm not sure I am anymore. Sarah sat down. Vivian was 91. She had a face that had once stopped cameras, high bones, dark eyes, a mouth that still held the ghost of extraordinary expression. She spoke precisely and slowly, and chose her words the way a jeweler chooses stones. She never mentioned her past. Sarah didn't know to ask. What Sarah knew was this. Vivian liked chamomile tea, disliked the television, could identify any bird that landed in the courtyard by sound alone, and laughed, rarely but fully, at dry humor delivered without apology. They met every Saturday. Sarah brought flowers, or shortbread, or sometimes just herself. They talked about Sarah's students, about books, about the sparrow that returned each week to the same stone bench. Vivian listened to everything with the focused attention of someone who understood that listening was its own form of love. What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Vivian Ashford had once been Vivian Vale. And, in 1934, Vivian Vale had been the most famous face in silent cinema. She had made 31 films. She had been on the cover of Photoplay 4 times. She had owned a house in Pasadena with a garden that took 3 people to maintain. And she had given it all up quietly in 1938, not from failure, but from a choice so private and deliberate that no one in the industry had ever fully understood it. She had a son. His name was Dashiell, and he was 33, and he ran a media company in Chicago that he built from nothing. And he visited his mother twice a year, and called every Sunday at noon without fail. He loved her. He was also, in the way of driven people, more comfortable with structure than with sitting still in a nursing home room watching sparrows. He didn't know about Sarah. 11 months into their Saturdays, Vivian said something that Sarah had not expected. I want to show you something. She reached beneath the folded blanket on her side table and produced a small photograph. Black and white, soft with age. A young woman on a film set, her chin lifted, her eyes full of something enormous and controlled, regal, luminous. Sarah looked at it for a long time. That's you, she said. That was me. Vivian's voice carried neither pride nor loss, just fact. 1936. I don't tell people. It changes how they sit with me. She paused. You've never sat with me like I was anything other than an old woman who likes birds and chamomile. I wanted you to know. I noticed that. Sarah looked up from the photograph. Her throat was tight. You're not just an old woman who likes birds, she said. You never were. No, Vivian agreed softly. But you treated me like I was worth sitting with anyway. That's rarer than you know. Vivian passed on a Wednesday in March, quietly, in her sleep. The coordinator called Sarah that morning. Sarah sat in her car outside the school for 10 minutes before she could go in and teach. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from a firm in Chicago. Inside was a document and a second, handwritten note on cream paper in a script that was clearly old and careful. You came every Saturday with yellow flowers, and you never asked me for a single thing. I have more than I ever needed, and no one left to leave it to who would understand why I'm leaving it. Use it for something that helps people feel less invisible. You'll know what that means. V. The sum left to Sarah was enough to change her life. She sat with it for a long time before she did anything at all. Dashiell Ashford called her 2 weeks after the letter arrived. His voice was measured, professional, and underneath it, carefully, grieving. She wrote about you, he said, in the letter she left me. She said you were the first person in years who sat with her like time wasn't something to spend elsewhere. A pause. I want you to know, I'm grateful, and I'm sorry I wasn't there more. She knew you loved her, Sarah said. Did she say that? Not in those words, but she talked about your Sunday calls. She'd mentioned the time, 11:59, she'd straighten up and wait, every week. A long silence. I didn't know she did that, he said. His voice had changed. She did, Sarah said gently. She always did. Sarah used the inheritance to fund a visiting program, trained volunteers paired with isolated nursing home residents across 3 counties. She kept teaching. She kept her classroom, her students, her Saturday habit of showing up somewhere she wasn't required to be. Kindness doesn't need an audience. Sarah visited Vivian because an old woman had no visitors, and that felt wrong, and she was the person who happened to notice. She didn't know about the films, or the fortune, or the famous face. She just brought yellow flowers, and sat down and listened, like the time was hers to give. That was all, and somehow, it was everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.